One of the best pieces of gear to up your video or photo game that doesn't break the bank are lens filters. Lens filters can enable you to do a ton of different stuff. And in this video, I'm gonna show you how they can let you see through water, cut through glare on windows, do long exposure photography during the day, shoot at a shallow aperture in bright sunlight, smooth out skin and blemishes, do smooth transitions from filming inside to outside, and shoot macro photography with pretty much any lens. I'm gonna show you all the different filters that I use to accomplish these things and what other accessories I would get as well so that you can put these on any lens you own and quickly change them. And really quick, here are 4 things before we jump into all of those tricks. Number 1, figure out the lens filter size on your lenses. So you have different sizes depending on the lens size. So this is a 58mm, this is a 72, and I have other lenses that are other sizes. So once you figure that out, then number 2, what I would do is I would buy a step-up ring. This enables you to go from different filter sizes up to the size of your filter. So if you have a smaller lens filter size and you're buying bigger lens filters, this will enable you to attach those without having to buy the exact size filter for every size lens you have. Now, number 3, what I would do is I would pick one filter size to stick with. So for me, I've picked 77mm. So everything that I buy is 77mm, 77mm. And then the 4th thing is you can get these magnetic lens adapters as well. So these are from Manfrotto and they are called the XUME, and they're kind of quick release magnetic adapters for your lens filters. So what you would do is you'd put one of these on your lens at the 77mm size, using a step-up ring for a smaller lens if you need to, and then you put this quick release on the other side, on the actual filter, and then magnetically, they'll stick together. Okay, enough preamble, let's get into the 7 tricks right now. And for full disclosure, I've bought most of these things on my own with my own money, most of these filters and step-up rings, all this stuff, spent my own money on, but Polar Pro did send me a few to test also, so I'll be showing some of these in the video too. For the first 2 tricks, we're gonna be using a circular polarizer. And what this does is it actually spins, and depending on how you spin it, you'll get a different result. So the first trick is being able to see through water. The circular polarizer enables you to cut down on glare. And so when you're looking through the surface of the water, if you spin this until you can see through completely, you can get some pretty cool shots of the bottom of a lake or a river or what have you. Tip number 2 is that the circular polarizer can also cut through glare on windows. So if you're filming through the windshield of a car and you want to make sure that you can see the person inside, you're going to want to throw on a circular polarizer, and that'll help you cut down on glare. These filters also enable you to adjust the blues in skies, so these are pretty good all-around filters to just have for a lot of different circumstances. Tricks number 3 and 4 both use neutral density filters. These ND filters are kind of like sunglasses for your lens. They darken the image so that you can then compensate by slowing your shutter speed or opening up your aperture to let more light in. ND filters have different numbers on them depending on how much light they stop from letting in, and you kind of have to do some math to figure out what filter you're going to want to use. But the standard ones that I recommend are ND8, which is 3 stops of light. So that would be changing your f-stop from f5.0 to f1.8. So that would be trick number 3, enable you to take really shallow depth of field photographs or video during the day outside in the bright sunlight. Otherwise, you're going to have to compensate with maybe your shutter speed. Maybe you don't want to use 1/2000 or 1/4000 for the photograph, or maybe you don't want to raise your shutter speed during a video because you don't want it to feel juddery or stutter at all. You want it to be smooth and cinematic. So you would use something like an ND8 to accomplish that. Trick number 4 would be to do long exposure photography during the day, and for that you would need something like an ND1000. These are extremely strong, basically black when you look through them, and what they do is enable you to do longer exposures and let more light reach your sensor so that you can do things like blur your time lapses during the day a little bit, or you might want to do star trails or some sort of astronomy photography during the day, and that would maybe let in the light too. If you're shooting videos in 4K, 5K, 6K, 8K, however many Ks, the higher the resolution, the more detail you're going to see in something like someone's skin. So you might start to see blemishes, or someone that has wrinkly skin, or people that are older, you're going to start to see more of that detail. So trick number 5 is going to be to get something called glimmer glass. This is from a company called Tiffin, and this one especially, I got Glimmer Glass 1. This will help to soften things like skin and other details, as well as bloom the highlights a little bit. So it makes a really minor difference, but for having a client that maybe wants their skin to be softened a little bit, or you want your video to look a little bit more cinematic with blooming of highlights or something like that, Glimmer Glass, there are a lot of different options, a lot of different strengths. I think Glimmer Glass 1 is a pretty good one to try. And when you look at the Glimmer Glass, it doesn't really look like much. It actually looks dirty. It looks like there's just a lot of little spots in it and stuff like that, but that helps enable the softening of skin and blooming the highlights a little bit. Trick number 6 is to get a smooth transition filming while going from inside to outside. And this is very tricky to do if you have a still lens that doesn't have a variable aperture that is smooth. If you do it and you're trying to click through the different apertures on your camera, it's not gonna look right. So you need to use something like a variable ND filter. These actually change as you spin them. Here, let me do that. So what you'll do is you'll start inside with it maybe wide open, a little brighter, and then as you go outside, you're going to slowly turn it. And so that would change the light in a consistent, smooth motion. It's not going to be easy. Maybe if you're on a gimbal, you can use your other hand to kind of spin this as you're walking, or maybe you have a second person that can help you. But something like that is near impossible to do without something like this, unless you have a variable ND that's built into your camera. I know some Sony cinema cameras have that, but auto ISO might work as well on some cameras. But if you want to do it right, you're going to want to use something like a variable ND. These variable NDs are really great to have on the front of maybe a vlogging camera too. So you want to set your settings exactly the same on your vlogging camera and leave them like that all the time, but you're going to be going inside and outside, and you're going to want to not have to fiddle with the settings. If you have this on the front of your camera, you can just turn it until you see the exposure on the flip out screen and know that's exactly what you're doing. The downside of these is they will degrade the quality of the video a little bit, especially if you buy a cheaper one. And I've started to notice that they vignette footage quite a bit. So you'll get the darker edges. And so I can tell people that are vlogging that use variable NDs because I can see the vignetting from this especially. Trick number 7 is to be able to shoot macro photography on a lens that is not a macro lens. Usually this means you'll have to then do it in manual focus, but these Hoya filters that my wife uses for her film photography lenses, she doesn't have a macro film lens, but what she does is she screws on these are different powers. They're Hoya filters. This one's +1. I think she's a +2 and a +4. So these filters, what they'll do is they'll kind of refract the image and the light and the focus distance. So she can screw one of those on a 50mm, on a 75mm lens. And what it'll do is it'll change how close you can focus. Now you have to do it manually because your autofocus might not detect the macro filter on there, but there are a lot of different brands that have these macro filters that you can put on lenses. So that would save you money, so you don't have to buy a separate macro lens. You don't have to travel with a separate macro lens. You can just grab one of these filters, screw it on, and be able to focus manually and get a photo or a video really up close. Another bonus tip would be if you're just trying to protect your lenses, you can get a UV filter. I used to put these on all of my lenses when I first got started because I was afraid of dropping the lens, breaking it, something like that. You could put UV filters on your cameras, but they will degrade the quality a little bit. And I have so many lenses at this point that I don't want UV filters on all of them, so I don't use them anymore. But if you're accident prone and you're going to drop your lens, or you just want to protect it even more, a UV filter is great for that. Now, I mentioned a lot of different lens filters. I'm going to quickly run through them, but links are also below. So the Cinema Series quartz line from Polar Pro is really great. They have ND8s with a polarizer, ND1000 for that long exposure daytime stuff, or just a circular polarizer if you want to just have that on top for doing some of the glare reduction. Glimmer glass from Tiffin, I recommend that. This variable ND is from Genius Tech. There are really expensive ones from companies like Tiffin, but this Genius Tech one is pretty good. It's not that expensive. Hoya filters are what I'm using here. What else do I got? These step-up filters are from Sensei, but honestly, there are a bunch of different brands. These are just pieces of metal with threads, so just find one that has good reviews and make sure that it goes all the way up to the size of your filter and all the way down to the size of your smallest lens. And I would definitely check out these Manfrotto magnetic filter adapters and holders. These are great. I would probably put these on all of my lenses if I used filters a lot. So I'd really recommend that you try some of these out. Maybe you learned something about filters and maybe one of these stood out to you. You kind of build over time what you own gear-wise. You don't need to go and buy all of these things. But if one of these specific tricks really intrigued you, or you're like, oh, I have that problem all the time, go get the filter for that thing when you're about to need to use it. So I think that's enough for lens filters. I mean, I have plenty of them at this point, but it's just thinking about what am I going to do photo or video-wise? Do I need a filter? And packing them. But the great thing is they don't take up that much space. So you can get a carrying case like this one, have them in your bag all the time, and then you can use them whenever you want. So hope you learned a little bit in this video. I've been Caleb Wojcik, and I'll see you in another video.